My kids do not care that it is 3:30. They don't. Call.
Like, why? What does that have to do with them? Like, time's a wasted for them.
Mr. Tolbert. Mr. Tao. All right. Well, looks like we have pretty close to a full room here, and it is 3:31. So Sherry, if you are ready.
I will start the recording.
Thank you. And I will call the meeting of the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Jalali.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Tao.
Here.
Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 3 through 21 are before you for your just consideration.
Right. My understanding is that we will be taking item number 21 separately. Is there anything else that should be taken for separate consideration this afternoon? All right. Seeing none, Ms. Prince moves the balance of the consent agenda. Any discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Baker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Item 21, Resolution 21-797, authorizing the Ramsey County Housing and Redevelopment Authority to exercise its powers within the city's Housing and Redevelopment Authority area of operation at the same time the city exercises the same powers.
All right, and it's timely. It feels like we were just talking about this about an hour ago at our HRA meeting. So we are, I don't believe we are having a second staff report here today. I'm looking at you, Sherry. Are you about to say something?
We have people from the Ramsey County and from PED with us, but I'm not sure who's speaking or on what.
Council President,
Yes, Mr. Tolbert.
we articulated to them that one staff report was enough, but I think they're on the line, but we said that the the staff report was appropriate.
The staff report at the HRA meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, it was a very spirited and enthusiastic conversation that ensued as well. So is there discussion before we go to a vote on the council iteration of the HRA, the Ramsey County Housing Redevelopment Authority HRA levy? I'm looking, don't see any further discussion. It doesn't mean we're not excited about it. It just means that we set our pieces earlier. So seeing no discussion, Mr. Tolbert moves approval. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Baker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
Great. And I think we said this earlier today, but thanks to the leadership at Ramsey County HRA, the commissioners and the staff there who have driven this forward, it's the feeling of working in partnership is stronger year after year, and we really appreciate this. The work and the focus of this levy on housing is appreciated and valued. So thank you so much.
Item 22 is the staff report on the American Rescue Plan update and report from the administration.
All right, and I believe we have Laura Logsden from our from finance here to give us an update. I know our last report about the American Rescue Plan was a hot minute after the guidelines were established, and we encourage you to come back and join us when you'd had an opportunity to fully digest the information. And so we are looking forward to a re-summary of the American Rescue Plan guidelines and how it applies to the city as we move forward with our strategic planning around spending this kind of once in a generation or perhaps once in a lifetime influx of dollars. So welcome, Ms. Logsden.
Thank you, Council President and members. For the record, my name is Laura Logsden. I'm a senior budget analyst in the Office of Financial Services. I'm going to share a presentation. Let me know if you're able to see that.
There it is.
Great. So I'm going to provide an overview of the American Rescue Plan Local Fiscal Recovery Fund requirements, how the Treasury interim final rule lays out eligible and ineligible uses of the funds, and a framework that the rule includes that allows us to assess whether an expense is eligible even if it's not specifically called out in the guidance. This is based on OFS's read of the Treasury Department rule, the summary guidance and other summary materials, and many webinars that we've been participating in, and also in with conversations that we've been having with our counterparts in the county to help build our collective understanding of eligibility. So this slide should be kind of a quick reminder that the city's allocation is $166.6 million, half of which we received last week, and the other half we will receive next year. The award period is a little retrospective. It starts March 3rd, 2021, and it goes through December 31st, 2026. The funds must be obligated, though, by the end of 2024 and then fully spent by the end of 2026. Our current understanding is that obligated means that the funds have to be encumbered by the end of 2024, but that's an area we're going to need to keep exploring and make sure we fully understand what that means. Also, the city has several reporting requirements. There will be quarterly reports and also an annual report. Treasury has not released specific requirements related to those reports and what type of data will need to be included. But we anticipate that there will be significant outcome measures required. Both the initial quarterly report and the initial annual report are due this August 31st, 2021. And the annual report will also need to be posted on the city's public website. In addition to those regular reporting requirements, different types of spending will also require other types of reporting. So for example, if the city spends funds on water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure projects, we would have to submit to the Treasury Department workforce plans and practices that demonstrate that they promote on-time and on-budget delivery. And just for your reference, throughout this PowerPoint, I've included page numbers that reference back to the guidance. So should just be a good reference material. The Treasury Department released its interim final rule on May 10th, and we're currently in a 60-day open comment period where the public can respond to the rule. We expect that Treasury will be releasing rolling guidance throughout the multi-year award period. So some of the requirements and restrictions in the rule could change over time, but at this point, the rule in its current format does govern how we can spend the funds. The rule establishes 4 key categories of eligible use, and then it also includes non-exclusive lists of examples of eligible spending that falls within these categories. The categories are responding to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts, providing essential workers with premium pay, providing government services to the extent that we have lost revenue due to COVID, and then the 4th category is making necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. In these next two slides, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each of those categories, just to provide a bit more context of what the rule says about each of them. So from those four kind of high-level top eligibility categories, the rule actually breaks it down even a little bit further into kind of 6 main categories. So the first is supporting public health expenditures. That eligibility category is to mitigate COVID-19, provide medical expenses, behavioral health care, and certain public health and safety staff. So this includes things like PPE, public communication efforts, and mental health treatment. The next is addressing the negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency. This includes economic harm done to workers, small businesses, households, the public sector, and particularly impacted industries like tourism and hospitality. So some of the examples in this category include things like assistance to unemployed workers, for example, through job training, assistance to households with things like rent, mortgage, food, and utilities, assistance to businesses and nonprofits, such as payroll, rent, or other operating costs. It also includes, in terms of the impact to the public sector, rehiring public employees to pre-pandemic levels. So to determine that level, we would have to compare our staffing as of January 27th, 2020 to January 27th, 2021. And then within those two categories of addressing negative economic impacts and addressing the public health emergency, the guidance calls out specifically serving the hardest hit communities and families. Treasury assumes that certain services are eligible when addressing public health or economic impacts within qualified census tracts, or when those services are provided to populations, households, or geographic areas disproportionately impacted by COVID. And it encourages spending for those groups that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So some examples that it provides of services that are eligible within that category in terms of negative economic impacts, that includes building stronger communities through investments in housing and neighborhoods. So it calls out services to prevent and address homelessness, affordable housing, and housing vouchers. Another example within that category is promoting healthy childhood environments. So they call out services such as childcare, home visiting programs, and enhanced services for foster youth. In terms of public health then, they call out services for funding for community health workers to help community members access services, to address the social determinants of health, housing services to support healthy living environments, and evidence-based community violence intervention programs to prevent violence and mitigate the increase in violence during the pandemic. The next three key categories then are first, replacing lost public sector revenue. The guidance specifically spells out that ARP funds can be used to provide government services to the extent that we have had a reduction in revenue due to the pandemic. Some examples of government services that they provide are building maintenance or PAYGO funded building infrastructure, including roads, cybersecurity modernization, health services, environmental remediation, and the provision of police, fire, and public safety services. The guidance provides a very specific formula for how we have to calculate our revenue loss. We'll start with 2019 actual revenue collected, and then calculate how much revenue we could have collected if not for COVID based on a formula that they give us. And then we will compare that to what we actually collected in 2020. And the difference is the amount that we've lost due to COVID that could then be spent on the provision of government services.
I'm sorry, Ms. Nager has a question.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Logsdon, can you clarify in terms of lost revenue, does that include not just general fund, but also sales tax?
Thanks, Council President and Councilmember Naker. Yes, so the Treasury guidelines outline a specific definition of the type of revenue that can be included. They refer to it as general revenues, and then general revenues are defined by the Census Bureau. So there's a set of revenues that are included, and that includes the general fund, sales tax. It includes most of our revenues. We're still kind of digging into that to make sure that we can like very specifically document and define these are the revenues we're including and this is why they're eligible. But broadly, it's like any revenue that goes towards the like general function of government.
And just as a quick follow-up, Council President, and if this is too in the weeds, that's totally fine. A follow-up is great, but I'm just wondering, would revenue that we receive to make up for revenue we didn't get, say from our sales tax, be subject to the same restrictions as our sales tax? I know that can only be spent in certain very specific ways, but in this case, the dollars wouldn't actually be coming from a sales tax. They'd be coming to make up for it. So I'm just wondering if that gives us some flexibility.
Council President Brandmoen and Councilmember Naker, I think I would need to follow up with you on that afterwards. I'm not sure right now that I can give a good answer to that question, but thank you. So the next area that's called out in the guidance is providing premium pay for essential workers. This is to support workers who have borne and will bear the greatest risks because of their service in critical infrastructure sectors. Premium pay is encouraged to be used retrospectively to recognize essential work that has not yet been compensated for. And it's also encouraged to be focused on supporting low-wage workers. So some examples that they provide are staff in nursing home, childcare workers, public health and safety staff, sanitation, food service, and farm workers. And then the last area of eligibility is investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. This is defined as necessary investments to improve access to clean drinking water and vital wastewater and stormwater infrastructure, and to expand access to broadband. The water and sewer eligibility is tied to Environmental Protection Agency programs for clean water and drinking water. And Treasury specifically encourages projects that replace lead service lines.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Logsdon, I know we're getting probably to ineligible uses, but I know last time you presented, you talked about general infrastructure being an ineligible use and that we are still looking for guidance on that. Do we have more information on that? I'm thinking specifically about the fact that to improve access to clean drinking water and wastewater and stormwater and broadband, you often need to tear up and then replace a piece of pavement.
Council President Brandmoen and Councilmember Naker, that's a great question. That's one that we have specifically posed to some of the national organizations that we're connected with. I am going to get to ineligible expenses on the next slide, but so I think to that specific question, I don't think we have an answer. But I do have more information about general infrastructure. And in terms of the revenue loss category, we can spend funds on the provision of government services, which they include in that definition, pay-go, building infrastructure, and roads. So we can spend our ARP funds on certain types of general infrastructure and things like roads. Within the portion that is directly tied to how much revenue we have lost. What's not clear to me is, can we spend, that's like a small portion of our total revenue, the portion that's tied to revenue loss. If we decide to spend funds on water and sewer infrastructure, if we, have to replace a road in the process, does that have to be tied to our revenue loss, or can it just be part of our total funds? And I think I don't have an answer to that question yet.
Gosh, you certainly hope so. I mean, otherwise how are you going to do that work? So it's a good question. Thanks for the follow-up.
Definitely, thank you. The final piece of this category is broadband. And broadband is the eligible broadband spending is focused on unserved and underserved populations and on areas that do not meet certain standards for upload and download speeds. I know this portion of the eligibility criteria is more restrictive than I think a lot of like broadband advocates were hoping for. And there's been a lot of pushback on this and a lot of like comments going to Treasury about this particular piece of the guidance. So it's possible that that could change going forward. But I just know that that is more restrictive than folks were hoping for. So the guidance also outlines this framework for how to determine if expenses are eligible, even if they're not specifically called out in the rule or in their examples. So it says multiple times, first identify if there was a harmful effect caused by COVID, and then show how COVID either caused or compounded that harm. Then, how would the expense that the thing that you want to spend money on address that particular harm, and how are you going to measure that if you were successful? It's also in our interest to assess if what we're spending money on has a service that would address a harm that had a disproportionate impact on certain populations, because that's something that Treasury is encouraging us to do, is to spend money on people and businesses and areas that were disproportionately impacted. And then next, on ineligible uses, the guidance outlines in pretty good detail expenses that would not be considered eligible. So first is making deposits into pension funds. They define deposits as extraordinary payments into pension funds that would reduce accrued unfunded liabilities. We can make regular payments into pensions if it's associated with a staff person's salary that we've deemed is an eligible ARP use. So if we were going to use ARP funds for city staff, all of their benefits are also considered eligible. States and territories cannot use the funds to directly or indirectly offset a reduction in net tax revenue that results from a change in law or regulation or an interpretation of law. We cannot use the funds for debt service costs. The funds are intended to be used prospectively, kind of except in the case of premium pay. So we cannot use the funds for prior debt or fees associated with any new debt, because those costs are not considered associated with responding to COVID. We also cannot use the funds for legal settlements or judgments. Again, because the purpose of the funds is to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency, any obligations related to settlements, judgments, or consent decrees are not considered eligible because they're not considered responding to the pandemic. And then we cannot use the funds to make deposits into reserves or rainy day funds. Similarly, that's not considered a response to the pandemic. Instead, they consider that savings for future needs. And deposits into reserves are also considered, they are not considered a provision of government services. And then finally, kind of on that general infrastructure piece again, the guidance calls out that infrastructure is generally not eligible for ARP unless it's water, sewer, or broadband, and unless it is responding specifically to the pandemic, to a public health need. So we could make investments in facilities where vaccines are being provided. That would be considered an eligible use. But then, like I was saying before, it's kind of nuanced, because within our revenue loss category, they specifically say maintenance and pay-go building infrastructure is eligible.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Logsdon, do you have a sense as to when we're going to have the answers to those questions about, water, sewer, broadband, compare relationship to the work you'd have to do on roads? I guess I'm just feeling like we were waiting for the money, we were waiting for the guidance, we got the guidance, but now there's detailed questions. And I know this evolves in phases, but I am getting a little antsy for answers, and so we can start to really make a plan. And I'm sure other cities are in the same boat. I'm just wondering if there's a sense as to when those more detailed questions will get answered.
Council President Bremmoen and Councilmember Naker, I can do some follow-up with some of the national organizations that we're connected to, and I can also connect with the county and see if they have an interpretation on that question.
It does seem like one of the muddier areas, you know, like where it feels like it's very rigid, but then on the other hand, there's a such as clause, and I know that there's a lot of desire from the council's perspective to try to make good on some of the deferred maintenance pieces that our streets and sidewalks and et cetera are suffering from. So I think that of all it seems like everything else is pretty straightforward. No depositing into the pension fund. Miss can read that one pretty straight directly. So I think that this one does seem like the kind of the big mystery and the one that will have the biggest impact on the decision making around these dollars and how they're spent.
Thank you. The final slide that I have is showing here on the left is the administration's strategic priority areas, and on the right are the council's 2021 work plan overarching priorities, where we can see pretty significant overlap. The plan moving forward, as we've been discussing in some of our prior meetings, is to form working groups around these priority areas that would identify proposals to address these strategic priorities and also, assess those priorities for ARP eligibility. The goal would be that during the summer, the working groups would meet and form proposals around these priorities. The working groups would likely complete a form describing the proposal and which eligibility, which category the proposal fits into, potentially also following that framework for identifying what harm was caused by COVID and how does this spending address that harm, just to make sure we've really ticked all the boxes of ensuring that any spending is going to be eligible and that we understand how we're going to be evaluating and measuring outcomes moving forward. We envision that some proposals may be ready for incorporation into the 2022 proposed budget. For example, if there were a proposal to increase funding for a program that already exists. Other proposals we envision would likely take longer to develop and could be incorporated into the 2022 adopted budget or through budget amendments as needed. And with that, I'm happy to take any other questions.
All right, I'm looking to my colleagues to see if we have further questions at this time. I will reiterate, Ms. Logsdon, I know that you are relaying the message from the budget perspective, but there's a very palpable desire for council members to participate in working groups and strategic decision-making about these resources and how they're spent. And that part of ARP reporting is something that is still eluding us. So to the extent we can get an update, I know Mr. McCarthy is on the call and others are watching this, that looking for that participation in the pushing up the sleeves and doing the work to make these strategic decisions about our resources, especially now that we're circling in on what are the allowable expenditures. I see Ms. Naker and Ms. Prince both have hands up, so let's start with Ms. Naker and then go to Ms. Prince.
Thanks, Council President. Ms. Logsdon, thanks for sharing these. This is the first time that I'm seeing this proposal for the working groups. Can you just say a little bit more about how you've gotten to this point of proposing these particular 6 and if this is still open for discussion or if these are sort of the final 6?
Sure. I'm not sure if the deputy mayor is on. She may want us to speak to this more, or Director McCarthy. But my understanding is these are the mayor's priorities for working groups moving forward.
Yeah, and Council President Bremmoen and Councilmember Naker, I would echo that. These are, as we've been starting to work through, the eligibility guidelines that Ms. Logsdon laid out today. These are priority areas that have come up, and we know that by and large we can fit into the eligibility guidelines in a lot of different ways. And so that's roughly how we arrived at these 6 lists, and also note that they're very broad and high level and overlap in a lot of significant ways with the city council's work plan for this year as well. And so that was another key driver in settling on this list of topics.
And Ms. Naker,
And-
did you have follow up? Sorry, go ahead, Mr. McCarthy.
I just wanted to circle back to your question, Council President Brenmoen, about participation on these work groups, and would note that we are still getting our arms around the guidance as we've laid out here today. And so I think the next step is really to actually start the work in earnest, and happy to invite and include council members and work groups where they'd like to participate. So yeah, those invitations are forthcoming once the work actually gets started.
All right, I appreciate that, and I do think Ms. Naker had, I believe, some follow up on that. But I know that there is work underway, and we're getting emails about it. So I want to make sure that we do not delay any further in engaging the council in these work groups. For example, the jobs, the right track, et cetera. Those expansions. We know we're getting messages, so we know that work is underway. Ms. Naker, did you have a follow up on your question, or I know your
Yeah, I
hand
mean,
went down.
Just super quickly, I think we've been saying from the beginning of this process that we really wanted to be in the co-driver's seat. And I know that I have also expressed that it seems like the buckets that are established, these working groups that's a big decision right there, because the decisions that come out of those groups are going to be what gets funded. And if there is no working group established for it, it's probably not going to come out as a recommendation. So I am disappointed that we are hearing this in what seems like a final form at this setting, rather than being consulted about it, which is something we've been requesting from the very beginning. I also don't see infrastructure or streets, as we've been talking about, as I know many of us have expressed an interest for, is on our council work plan on the 6 work groups. I don't know if maybe it's underneath one of those things, but I'm just, it does not seem like so far this has been a very collaborative process.
Okay, noted. Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Council President Brenmoen, and thank you, Councilmember Naker, for your comments. I feel really taken aback by this. I know how hard you both, as well as Councilmember Tolbert, have worked as the leadership team to propose that this be a joint effort of the council and the mayor's office. We're starting to be outside again. I've been able to attend meetings. The questions are coming up at community council meetings, I was at the Hillcrest meeting on Saturday. People want to know that their council members are in the loop on how these funds are going to be used to meet really dire community needs. And so I share the disappointment of my colleagues, and I hope we can do something to turn this into more of a collaborative effort, because I think that the people of St. Paul expect it to be that.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. And these messages, I'm looking to Mr. McCarthy. I realize you're receiving these messages in your role in sharing this as a budget, and but I also, as I was mentioning earlier, we know that these messages are being delivered more broadly as well. I don't know if you wanted to respond directly or.
Sure, Council President Brenmoen, happy to respond. I think, on the slide, we noted proposed work group areas. I think a key factor here is we have a long timeline, unlike we did with CARES. And I think what we're hoping to do today is share the areas that we're interested in, and noting how closely they align with the council's priorities for this year as well. And seeing that these are very high level topic areas, and allow for a lot of refinement and that we would seek to do through engagement with you all, to figure out where you want to be keyed in and where you want to work within those work groups. So again, this is a proposed list that we're sharing today. we have a long runway to do this work, and we know that this is probably not the final list, that this is going to be work that we do over the next 4 years, and that's going to continue to evolve as we identify needs and work with you. And as we do our normal community engagement around the budget process, it's also going to refine this process as well as we continue to partner with the county and the school district and learn where they're interested in investing their significant resources as well. We've had conversations, I know, with council members about making sure we're not duplicating efforts of those other jurisdictions. So all of those factors are going to shape the work that we do here. And our intent today was to share the proposed list that we have with you, and happy to hear feedback on what you think is missing. And so I noted the infrastructure piece. Again, we're trying to tie it back to what we've learned so far from the guidelines, but really interested in having that conversation and hearing what things you see as potentially missing or areas that you'd want to make sure that we're focusing specifically on. So I think, again, that was our focus today, is putting out a proposed list and getting some feedback.
All right, well, thanks for that clarification. And I think I've heard Ms. Naker say this well, but it's just even in the deciding of which groups are going to move forward, some important decision making is already happening. I do also, I appreciate what you're saying about the broad reach of each of the groups that are out there, and how they twist and turn in terms of what their focuses are going to be is still up for grabs. And I would encourage council members in their comments here today. I mean, we've heard street infrastructure and some of the deferred maintenance things that are maybe challenging to fund unless we include it in sewer broadband and water infrastructure repairs. But what's missing? What do we want to see on here? If this is an opportunity to share feedback, then let's make sure that we do that as well. I see Ms. Prince's hand back up, and then Ms. Yang.
Thank you, Council President Brenmon. And I also want to say I'm concerned that I really appreciate, and I believe it's vitally important that we're working with the county and with the school district. I mean, as we did today with the HRA levy, that is a really important partnership. But for decisions to be being made right now between the county and the administration without the input of the council is not appropriate. Whether it's decisions about where Right Track is going and so forth, council members should be at those tables. And I'm deeply concerned that I'm kind of thinking that, over the last year plus, when the administration got used to operating in an emergency order environment, that that it formed partnerships and relationships outside of the council that were productive and that may seem to be taking precedence over dealing with this city council first. So I just want to really warn against having county administration work groups that do not include council members.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. And thanks for that acknowledgement of the county piece of that as well. Ms. Yang has a hand up, and then Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I do echo what my colleagues have said. And John, I was wondering, because I feel it's so important to understand where Ramsey County, for example, is going to be investing their ARP dollars. Can you share what type of interaction you all have been having with them already? Have you had initial meetings about it, or is that something you're planning to do? And then I also, I feel like the council has already made it really clear how interested and invested we are in being a part of crafting where we invest our St. Paul ARP dollars. And so I'd like to hear from you on what that looks like. I know in the past you all have sometimes met with us one-on-one, not about ARP dollars, but about other projects to do briefings or to get our input. Is that something that you are committed to doing? Because I am personally interested in that. And also I have an interest in sitting in the work groups as well, especially around vaccines. And I've already shared many times to you all how important it is to make sure that our ARP dollars are being allocated to community organizations that are serving Black, Indigenous, and communities of color when it comes to vaccination rollouts. And that just is so, the need for that is so high, because when we do see the statistics of who has died from COVID-19, like our Hmong community is a large population in that, and our Karen community and so many other communities of color, especially, who are not, who don't have as much access to getting the vaccines as other affluent communities or other types of communities. And so wanted to say all this in hopes that we could get a bit more clarity from you in the space here today.
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Yang. So for the first part of your question related to conversations with the county and the school district, the primary way that we've been working with them so far has been really kind of in the administrative and technical standpoint. So primarily Laura and myself meeting with the county CFO, the school district CFO, and school district chief of staff. The county was a direct recipient of CARES funding, so they built out a really extensive back office and administrative function. So we've been really just digging into how did they do that, what was their experience. We spoke to you about that at an org meeting, I think last week or the week before, and what we learned from the county. So most of our conversations really with them around strategic planning and just figuring out how to manage these dollars. And to some degree, we've talked a bit about, where are key areas where the county already has existing infrastructure in some of our priority areas like jobs and workforce development and housing. Obviously, they have a lot to offer in public health and in housing and jobs and workforce development. So making sure just really early in the process, we're sort of understanding where it might make sense for each of us to lead in some of these areas. But beyond that, nothing too substantial beyond those conversations. The second part of your question around how we can best communicate to you, I mean, I think this is really helpful for us to hear, because we want to make sure that we're meeting your needs in terms of communication. I think the example that I've heard cited a couple times here on the Right Track jobs program, about that coming to you, without additional background. That's something that we are looking forward to having briefings with you, and we wanted to get that information to you because the county is actually going to take board action on their ARP dollars on that next week. And so we wanted to make sure that that was something the council was aware of before it went to the county board, because they're using our branding, the Right Track name, but it is very much a county-led program that we're supporting. They're putting more of their resources in, and the big issue there is a timeline issue, because it's a summer jobs program, and we wanted to make sure that we could hit the hiring timeline that the county and our parks folks have laid out. So understand that that's not necessarily sort of the perfect way of getting that info, but it was largely driven by the county timeline. And again, happy to do individual briefings or briefings with small groups, or coming back to your org meetings, whatever works best for you. I think we're learning on the fly here, and happy to figure out, how it makes sense for us to plug into your meetings and your conversations, so that we can get you the most updated information as we have it. Which is, I do want to say that has been our intent, and I know that a lot of this stuff is coming in kind of fast and furiously, so we're trying to communicate it to you as soon as we get that info.
And I will say, Mr. McCarthy and Ling Becker were requesting time at the org committee meeting this morning to share some information, and we simply didn't have time, given that, as obviously we went a half hour over our time. To get some of this information out. And so I think a little bit of it is, then having to make the in terms of just the Right Track conversation. But this, I think two things that I'm thinking as and I see Ms. Prince and Ms. Naker have a hand up, but, we just a reminder to to myself and to the council is that unlike other CARES dollars that came to us previously, we do have time. We have time to spend these dollars and time to be thoughtful with our planning. And I think we want to make sure that we do that. And so I think that we're sort of conditioned to feel fast and feverish about, getting in there, making a plan, because the money is going to go out the door. And if we can pace this so that we're making thoughtful decisions and including the council and by way of our community by way of the council and et cetera is the way that we would prefer to do this, and we do have time. And I keep on having to check my own self about that because I'm stressed that we have to spend it in 62 days or something, and we do have some time. So I appreciate the information too about the right track, because that is something that I know has been starting to percolate in our inboxes. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. And I do want to say I completely agree, and I don't think we need to be, in a state of emergency about this. But at the same time, I think, hearing that the right track thing is coming to us because the county is taking action on it, I think the longer it takes us to get our heads around what our plan is, the more we're then going to start to become subject to other people's plans, other entities' plans. And I really want us to have a plan that we can be bringing others along with. So I completely agree. We're not at that point necessarily yet, but this is now, I think, the third thing or second thing we've seen that's like without our plan. So, and I appreciate your point, Mr. McCarthy. I think, misunderstood. I thought this was being proposed as a fully baked set of work groups, and it sounds like you're actually bringing it to us for our input, which I appreciate. And to Council President Brunmowen's suggestion to us that we share areas that we think are missing. I think one of the areas that I would suggest adding in is childcare, and I think that might go underneath jobs. But that's something that I think is not only an urgent need, but it's something that I think gives us a chance to leverage county and school district dollars to the point that Councilmember Yang was making. And wherever we can find areas of alignment and make our dollars go further, I think we should be. So I would suggest that kind of being a sub bullet perhaps to that work group.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. And I know we're seeing this kind of for the second time, but for this particularly the proposal for work groups for the first time. And so if as you have time to think about this, and we should be providing ongoing feedback around the work groups and like what the subcategories could and should be, or what the broader category should be. So we are not done with this conversation, but if there's other immediate reactions. Mr. Tolbert has a hand up.
I just want to add on. I think it's right, and I think I'm glad that it was corrected that these are the work groups that are being proposed, not the final work groups. And also, I don't want the Right Track Plus, I will say, is one of those things where the timing is important. I think Mr. McCarthy pointed that out, particularly because it's for summer jobs for young people with wraparound services included. And I believe the county is bringing over $2 million to that proposal. So it's one that would make sense for us to try and partner with them. I think it's our staff time that is part of the proposal, or an FTE or something like that. I suspect we'll get more information on that. But overall, I do think, Council President, it's really wise that you reminded everybody that, it's not something that we should be thoughtful about how we allocate these dollars. And I know we're accepting $83 million, which it's probably in a couple minutes here, which is it's a very large number. But I will also remind, I think, the administration and staff and my colleagues as well, that any allocation of that money after needs to be passed through this. And I think if we all agree that we want to be thoughtful about it, that people would take notice and recognize that having true partnership with the council would help ensure that those things get passed, because they don't have to pass. So just putting that out there. I look forward to working collaboratively, and I hope that the spirit is brought back towards the council as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. All right. Ms. Logsdon, Mr. McCarthy, thank you for sitting in the hot seat and taking our reaction here. And again, colleagues and council staff, this is a call to us to engage. The time is now. And if we have feedback on these proposed groups, and then also just how we want to ensure that we are participating in them when they begin convening. It's wonderful. All right, that is a report. We do not need to vote on it. Thank you very much for the information, and we look forward to the continued conversation and partnership in the future. So thank you very much.
Item 23, Resolution 21-673, clarifying the City Council sole authority to review appeals from the zoning code.
All right, and I was told this item is being withdrawn.
Council President, I am going to withdraw it, but prior to being withdrawn, I want to thank Councilmember Prince and Councilmember Yang for going to the mat and co-sponsoring this for members of the community and leadership from Ward 1 who felt that this project wasn't going to work for them. And, you know, I personally, I am disappointed in that how everything unfolded. You know, I know that the administration talked a lot about making sure the city works for all of us. And that should also include people who are going to get displaced. And I think it's a hard place to be in if we have a home, we have a car, we have transportation, we have all that. It's really hard for us to understand the folks who don't have a home, who are getting forced out of their homes, whether rent is too high or they lost their job or something happened in the pandemic and they don't have a place to go to. But those are the folks that are going to get displaced in the city. And so I hope that as we go forward, the administration work with us, the mayor works with us. I know there's a pattern of times and places where we haven't been at the table. And I hope that when it comes to anti-displacement work, that the administration will work with us to bring the community and the council to the table so that we can work efficiently as a team, the administration, the council, to do this work going forward. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. And thank you also for continuing to champion the work that the council started in 2018 on inclusionary zoning and that study. And I know that you've really been banging that drum of let's get that going, let's get the funding, let's do that analysis so we know to work with that. So I want to acknowledge your leadership as well. Ms. Prince.
Yeah, and I want to speak to the fact that I, on behalf of Councilmember Tao and Councilmember Yang and myself, I requested that City Attorney Lindsay Olson attend today's meeting to explain her decision in response to the resolution that this council passed on April 28th, asking that she seek an advisory opinion from the Attorney General's office. I did hear before the meeting that Ms. Olson will not be attending the meeting to answer these questions and clearly feels that she has responded to us. Our concern is that the request that that we asked to go to the Attorney General's office was for a service that is provided by that office to public attorneys of municipalities and other public entities when there are questions of law or case law, as in this case, that are unprecedented and unsettled. We received a letter from Ms. Olson by email stating that she would not seek the AG's advisory opinion, and we're disappointed by that. Ms. Olson also provided council members with her official written opinion in this matter, in which she determined that the mayor's unprecedented veto was legal. And while that is her opinion, a supermajority of this council felt that a non-binding advisory opinion could only help to provide some closure to the unsettledness for council members and for the community organizations who have worked so hard on this particular very difficult case. At the same time, Ms. Olson's opinion did not address key aspects of the State Planning Act and the St. Paul Zoning Code. It also allowed an absurd result in this matter, that by the stroke of a veto pen, the mayor was able to unilaterally award a $57 million development right to a private developer without reference to the extensive quasi-judicial record in this case. Finally, I'll close by saying, and I believe still on behalf of council members Tao and Yang that Ms. Olson's unwillingness to appear today illustrates another example of the same serious problem we have with her ignoring our April 28th resolution that passed on a 5-2 vote. When the council and the mayor disagree on issues of law and outcomes of legal interpretation, who is the city council's attorney? And that is a question that still needs to be answered.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. And I think that the request is perfectly reasonable. My suggestion to you is to submit a resolution requesting that staff report from the city attorney's office to make sure that we properly notice it. But I appreciate your comments here today and recommend you use that avenue to get a report to those ends. All right. So this item then is being withdrawn. Correct, Mr. Tao?
Item 24 is first reading of ordinance 21-17, granting the application of Ali Alferdi to rezone property at 444 Maryland Avenue West from B1 Local Business District to T2 Traditional Neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
All right, and I'm not requesting a staff report on this item. A public hearing will be next week, and I do have some comments that I will save for that time.
So again, the ordinance is laid over to June 2nd for second reading public hearing. Item 21 is also first reading of ordinance 21-18, granting the application of Stonewood Investments, LLC, rezone property at 300 Banfield Street, 149-155 Dusman Street, rezone from B2 community business to RM2 medium density multifamily residential, and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
All right, and I do not believe we need a staff report on this item either.
Okay, so the ordinance is laid over to June 2nd for second reading public hearing. Item 26, resolution public hearing 21-125, approving the application of Dual Citizen Brewing for a sound level variance in order to present live amplified sound on June 12th at 725 Raymond Avenue.
These things are putting smiles on my face. Great. This has been a public hearing held virtually. As such, Ms. Jalali will move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 27, resolution public hearing 21-129, amending the city budget to accept $83,320,812 in federal coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds to respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency and its negative economic impacts.
You don't hear that every week, do you? All right. Long discussion earlier in this staff report about this item. Mr. Tolbert will move it's to close a public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? And just, I think just reiterating what was said before, this is an opportunity for the administration and the council and our communities to work in strong partnership as we determine where these unprecedented funds are allocated. It's a crucial time and of crucial importance. So I will support your motion, Mr. Tolbert. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 28, ordinance 21-16, granting the application of Iowa Investments LLC to rezone property at 1053 Dale Street North from R4 one family residential to T2 Traditional Neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map. And this public hearing was continued from last week, and you can adopt this today if you choose.
Yep. And this was an item that was noticed as a public hearing, but did not make it on the agenda. So we called it for public hearing, held open the public hearing for today to make sure that we gave folks an opportunity. We have held a public hearing virtually and made that extra extended week to make sure any comments could come in. And as such, I will move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tobert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the ordinance is adopted. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 29, RLHTA 21-212, 604 Asbury Street. Item 32, RLHTA 21-202, 1231 Barclay Street. Item 33, RLHTA 21-214, 1957 Berkeley Avenue. Item 34, RLHTA 21-213, 1672 Conway Street. Item 35, RLHTA 21-192, 818 Edmond Avenue. Item 37, RLHTA 21-208, 1078 Inglewood Avenue. Item 38, RLHBO 21-18, 1082 Euclid Street. Item 39, RLHTA 21-200, 1282 Hague Avenue. Item 40, RLHTA 21-188, 571 Hall Avenue. Item 41, RLHTA 21-211, 1856 Highland Parkway. Item 46, RLHTA 21-188, 1247 Jesse Street. Item 44, RLHTA 21-190, 1180 Lane Place. Item 45, RLH FCO 21-58, 784 Laurel Avenue. Item 46, RLHTA 21-248, 876 Lawson Avenue East. Item 47, RLHTA 21-207, 820 Lexington Parkway South. Item 48, RLH SAO 21-36, 781 Menominee Avenue. Item 49, RLHTA 21-189, 755 Minnehaha Avenue West. Item 50, RLH-RR 21-28, 174 Page Street West. Item 51, RLH-RR 21-26, 575 Park Street. Item 52, RLH-RR 21-27, 595 Park Street. Item 53, RLHTA 21-170, 1360 Point Douglas Road South. Item 54, RLH-RR 21-29, 2022 Stillwater Avenue. Item 55, RLH-SAO 21-38, 855 3rd Street East. Item 56, RLHTA 21-227, 1541 West Minnehaha Avenue. Item 57, RLH-RR 21-31, 1143 Woodbridge Street. Item 58, RLHTA 21-238, 445 Wyoming Street East. Item 59, RLH-AR 21-37, delinquent garbage bills. Item 60, RLH-AR 21-38, also delinquent garbage bills. Item 61, RLH-AR 21-39, delinquent garbage bills. Item 62, RLH-AR 21-40, delinquent garbage bills. Item 63, RLH-AR 21-41, delinquent garbage bills. And item 64, RLH-AR 21-42, delinquent garbage bills. And the motion is to adopt these items.
I was just smiling thinking of the bad old days when we had to vote on each and every one of those individually, and grateful that we've evolved. So moved by Ms. Naker. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following item, no objection to the legislative hearing officer's amended recommendation was received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoption of item 31, RLH TA 21-261, 143 Baker Street West. And again, the motion is to amend and adopt.
So moved by Ms. Naker. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted as amended. For the following items, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is to refer to legislative hearing to the dates noted. Item 30, RLH BO 21-14, 702 Aurora Avenue, July 6th. And item 42, RLH AR or RR 21-24, 975 Hudson Road, June 15th. And again, the motion is to refer the legislative hearing dates that I mentioned.
So moved by Ms. Prince. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are continued to the dates that I mentioned, the pertinent dates. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 36, RLH SAO 20-40, 2233 Energy Park Drive, and there is a brief staff report.
Thank you. Ms. Mormont.
Council President Brenmo and council members, you have a new document attached to the file as of this afternoon. It's 10 pages, a letter and photographs and comments. Although this is a very straightforward, in my view, nuisance abatement matter, the arguments made in the documents are technical in nature and relate to the street layout and some public works concerns. Public Works has been involved in this particular case, and I have asked that they comment on some of the items that have been brought up in that so that you can benefit from their experience with this particular property and the matters being discussed. So I'm asking that you continue your public hearing to next Wednesday, and Public Works will have a response for you by that time.
All right. And the sponsor on that resolution was Ms. Jalali, who says yes. She will go with the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. Any discussion on that motion? Ms.
If
Jalali?
if I could speak briefly to that. Thank you. I will support the continuance and really appreciate my office staff and Matt Pravatsky and all the different departments that have been working to make sure that queries about this can be responded to thoroughly. I think that the continuance will support that and address the issues brought up in the letter. So just want to expand a little upon that with some appreciation, and would move that motion. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is continued to June 2nd. That was our last item.
All right, so we've come to the end of our agenda at 4:41 on a beautiful May day. Does anyone have news from the wards or other announcements they'd like to share before we adjourn? It looks like we're ready to shut off our sprinklers or whatever we have to do. All right, great. Well, a lot to do that we covered today, and I will just reiterate that we do have follow-up after our morning meeting and plenty of work to do on that regard. It feels like it's still being absorbed. So more on that to follow, but in seeing that there is no other business to come before us today, we will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
And sediment and nutrients.